Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today you will be learning about what caused the renewed interest in the classical world. If you can think back, before we went on vacation, we learned that the word classical means Greece and Rome. So when we say the classical world, we're talking about the Greeks and the Romans and the world that they lived in. We look at the word renewed and we see that the root in there is new and the prefix is re, which means again. So things that are new again or a new again interest in the classical world. This comes to us from lesson 27, section 1, subsection 1 of our TCI textbook, which this section of information can be found on page 358 in the green textbook or online, lesson 27, section 1 in TCI online. Okay. But before we kind of get into what caused this renewed interest in the classical world, let's go ahead and review what that classical world was like. So let's go ahead and step back in time a little bit. First of all, take a look at this image. Look at it. What do you see? What do you notice? What things look familiar? What civilization do you think this comes from? Okay, so let's go ahead and think about Rome a little bit. And back in the year 330 CE, the Roman Empire was split into two, with a new capital in Constantinople and the old capital still remaining in the city of Rome, which we know is on the Italian peninsula. In the 400s, Rome was repeatedly invaded by those Germanic tribes, those Goths, Visigoths, Angles, Saxons. The city of Rome in the western side, it was just bombarded by these barbaric tribes trying to invade and conquer. There were political, social, and economic issues that weakened the empire. We talked at the beginning of the year of what these political, economic, and social problems were. So, if you can kind of remember some of those things, they had no good system for choosing a leader. Taxes were high. There was a lot of inflation. Um, the social fabric of the society started to break down. There was a lot of crime. People were hungry. There was unemployment. Large, wealthy landowners were using slave labor instead of hiring Romans to grow crops. All of these issues helped weaken the empire, in addition to these barbarian tribes that are attacking constantly. And then finally, in the year 476 CE, the last Roman Empire is removed from the throne and he is conquered by a Germanic tribe leader named Odoacer. And then it's good to remember that that is what happened on the western side of the Roman Empire. The eastern side continues for another 1,000 years under the title of what we call the Byzantine Empire. Okay, and this Byzantine Empire is located around the city of Constantinople, right on the edge of the Black Sea, and becomes a major trading center for trade between the Middle East and Europe. In Europe, Western Europe, we call it, after the fall of Rome, sometimes we refer to this as the Dark Ages. Again, as we look at this new slide, go ahead and take a moment and look at those images. These images represent what types of Roman ruins would have been left behind in Europe. I mean, obviously, they're still standing today. So, in the Dark Ages, the citizens in Europe, they saw these buildings or remnants of buildings, but it was already from a time that had long since passed. Okay, they didn't know the technology that they used to create them. They didn't understand the math and the science behind building large structures such as these. But it was just always kind of partly there as part of the fabric of the geography. Um, After Rome falls, the wealthy upper classes, they leave the cities and they go to the countryside because they're trying to avoid attacks by those Germanic tribes. Okay, the wealthy people have the means and they have the money to be able to do that. So they flee the cities and they go to set up in the countryside so that they're safe. Schools are closed, learning stops, society becomes focused on survival instead of on knowledge and learning. If people are struggling to survive, they're not able or capable of going to a school and being able to learn about math, science, history, language arts, those types of things. They're focused on survival and they're focused on staying safe from Germanic tribes and finding enough food to eat. People are struggling to survive, and these once beautiful Roman cities, they start to crumble as time goes on. The weather and the climate just erodes these beautiful cities, nature takes back over. Some highlights from the Middle Ages. A lot of this stuff should seem familiar to you as we go through here. First, let's take a quick look at some of these images. First of all, we have our image here of looks like a ruler. This is Charlemagne, our king who united the Franks. We have our Viking boat to represent the Vikings, a knight in armor to represent the knights. We have a Gothic cathedral here, and a representation of medieval art showing Mary and the baby Jesus surrounded by the Pope. Some highlights from the Middle Ages is Charlemagne. Like I just mentioned, Charlemagne united the Franks. He's considered to be the father of Europe. He is really the first time that there's been some unification of Europe since the Roman Empire, right around the year 800. We have our Vikings, Magyars, and Muslims attacking from all directions. So now these barbaric tribes have kind of intermingled with the Romans, and they're starting to settle, but now they're being attacked from the north by the Vikings, from the south up through Spain by the Muslims, and from the east, which is now today part of the country of Hungary, from the east are the Magyars. Feudalism is established to create safety and order. This is that system of loyalty and protection that was established in Europe, started by Charlemagne. The Catholic Church continues to educate people about God, but that's pretty much it. The church is the main daily life, the big thing at the center of people's lives, but it is primarily just educating people about God and how to behave. People do not know how to read or write. Really, the only people that are able to read and write are the clergy. Clergy are people that work for the church. Even the kings and the queens and the nobles, they don't know how to read and write at this point. They're relying on the clergymen to do any writing or reading for them. And knowledge of science and math, it's not known in Europe. However, in the Middle East, where the Islamic Empire is establishing itself throughout this time, there is knowledge of math and science and algebra and astronomy and those types of things, anatomy. But in Europe, nope, they don't know anything about it at this point. Art is simple and non-technical. We can look at this image here on the screen, and this kind of shows us a representation of what medieval art looked like. We will get more into the type of art in the Middle Ages in the coming up days. Okay, another topic that needs to be addressed when we think about a renewed interest in the classical world are the Crusades and trade. Holy wars are called crusades. This is when European knights and armies were sent to the Middle East to try to reclaim the Holy Land, which was a city called Jerusalem, we call the Holy Land. The Muslims were in control of it. The European Catholics, Christians wanted that land back for themselves. Both Muslims and Christians considered Jerusalem to be a holy city. The Europeans wanted to take control back, so we call that the Crusades. Trade begins to increase at this time with the Byzantine Empire as these soldiers and armies and crusaders are on their way to the Holy Land. They begin to trade with Muslims in the Middle East through the Byzantine Empire. And as European merchants and crusaders, those soldiers, as they come back from the East, they bring back ideas and learning about Greece and Rome that the Byzantines and the Muslims had kept protected. Europe had lost that information, but the Byzantine Empire and the Muslims in the Middle East, they still had those books. They still had that knowledge. They had that learning. They had those books translated in their own languages. And so, as these European soldiers and merchants began to interact with the Muslims and the Byzantines, they start to talk about these ideas and they bring these books back with them when they return home into Europe. The Byzantines and the Muslim empires had been pretty stable throughout the Middle Ages. The Muslims had expanded, and the Byzantines really held on with their capital city in Constantinople. Okay, this brings us to the Roman Catholic Church. Okay, and take a look at two of those images showing us a simple church at the time and an illuminated manuscript representing the Catholic Church and its learning. When Rome fell, the Catholic Church survived. Okay, the political systems of Rome fell, the economy fell, the social structures fell, but the Catholic Church remained there as a constant, and it survived. Old copies of original church writings and church literature, they were protected and preserved by monks and nuns. Monks and nuns live in monasteries and convents. Um, these books were not destroyed. They were kept safe in the monasteries and protected by the monks and the nuns. Okay. When the books got old and damaged, monks would hand copy um, into a new book so that learning was preserved. Okay. But remember, the clergy, these monks and nuns, they're the only people that know how to read. Okay. So they're the only people with access to these books. These church officials, they can speak, they can read, and they can write in Latin. Okay, most people in the Middle Ages do not know Latin. Instead, they speak what we call the vernacular language. A vernacular language is the language that regular people speak. Okay, sometimes like we would think of it maybe like slang is vernacular, or the way that you speak with your friends. If your parents and like old people like me, if we don't understand what you're saying, that's because you're speaking in the vernacular. Okay, it's the local language, and it is not Latin. These people speak Spanish, they speak English, they speak German, they speak French, they speak Polish, but they don't speak Latin. The only people that can read, write, and speak Latin are the clergy, and this is the language that the books are written in, left over from the Roman Empire, because Latin was the language of the Romans. Therefore, this knowledge of old Roman literature, it's only available to the church officials and very few people in the Middle Ages, because regular people don't know how to speak or read or write the language that the books are written in. However, we finally get to the late Middle Ages. Okay, this is that last period of the Middle Ages. This is leading us right up towards the Renaissance. In the late Middle Ages, there's three causes. Okay, I'm going to go through these one by one. You might want to pause the video here so that you can help take your notes in your notebook on page 11, or you can also find the same information on page 358 in your textbook or online TCI online, lesson 27, section 1. What was the Renaissance? Okay, so here's our causes. There's three causes lead to one effect or one change. Okay, our first cause: merchants and crusaders brought ideas back from the Muslims in the Middle East. Muslims had been using Greek and Roman ideas for centuries, and they never really stopped using these ideas. So, as that trade increases and those crusades bring these soldiers to the Muslim territories in the Holy Land and in the Middle East, as the soldiers and the merchants return to Europe, they bring the ideas from the Muslims with them. Our second cause of this renewed interest in the classical world, the Catholic Church preserved, or it kept, classical Greek and Roman books. They started to look at these old books or manuscripts, and they started to translate them from Latin into English, German, French, Spanish, etc. In this way, they were able to protect and keep knowledge from Greece and Rome. Our third cause: Europeans also read classical books that came to them from the Byzantine Empire and Constantinople. Okay, so we have three places that the Europeans are starting to get information about Greece and Rome from. They're getting it from the Muslims, they get information from the Catholic Church, and they're getting information from the Byzantine Empire. This leads to one big effect. What ends up happening, Europeans begin to look at the past. They look at the Greeks and the Romans for ideas, knowledge, and inspiration. It is causing this renewed interest in all things Greek and Roman, so that they're coming up with ideas, knowledge, and inspiration from the Greeks and the Romans. This directly leads us to the Renaissance. Okay, so here's what you're going to do now that you have listened to this presentation. In your notebook on page 11, you have a handout, and you can see on our chart that we have three causes. You are going to summarize each of these causes in your own words, and then draw a scene that shows each cause of renewed interest in the classical world of Greece and Rome. Okay, so you're going to draw a picture of merchants and crusaders bringing ideas back from the Middle East. You are going to draw a picture of the Catholic Church having preserved classical Greek and Roman books. Okay, maybe you're going to draw a picture of somebody looking at one of these books and translating it. Okay, you're going to draw a picture of Europeans reading books that come back from the Byzantine Empire. Okay, and then finally, what happened as a result of these causes, that last box on the chart, you're going to copy down the effect. Europeans began looking to the past Greeks and Romans for ideas, knowledge, and inspiration. This assignment will be due by tomorrow, which would be Wednesday. And if you have any questions, please make sure that you raise your hand and ask. Okay. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. If you need to rewind the video at any point and pause it, go ahead and do so.